Breaking through glass ceilings and really taking things to the next level when it feels like the odds are constantly stacked against you. It's something that we're all familiar with, especially as entrepreneurs and as women functioning in a society that doesn't always play to our strengths. And that's why we have Bardish here today. She's going to tell us a little bit about herself, why this topic matters to her, and why it should matter to you. Bardish, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Shauna. It's great to be with you today.
I'm so excited to hear about your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Bardish Chagger. I am born and raised in the Waterloo region, born at St. Mary's Hospital, and then been in Waterloo my whole life. My grandfather immigrated from India in the early 70s. He never would have imagined that his granddaughter would put her name on a ballot, let alone be elected. And to be honest, I never imagined it either. But I did. I ran for office. I run for school board trustee, but I also ran to be the member of parliament for Waterloo. And in 2015, the good people of the riding of Waterloo elected me to represent them. And at that time, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau asked me to join his cabinet, which turns out was the first time in the history of our country since Confederation that we had a gender balanced cabinet. So to be part of that moment was monumental, and also really important because I think when it comes to making sure decisions work for more Canadians, that the representation of the individuals making those decisions is also represented. So it's been exciting. And here we are, almost a decade later, still doing great work for the riding of Waterloo, for the region of Waterloo. And for me, Shauna, when I met you, it was an opportunity to actually advance this kind of a conversation because I think more of them are needed.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't agree more. Honestly, it's just this idea here. I to pick where to start, right? Look at all of the already glass ceilings being broken just within that short introduction. And so we can see right away that you are no slouch when it comes to doing the unthinkable and really stepping into your power, really showing what you've got and what I mean, I'm going to argue what everybody has potentially
Yes,
ahead of them. Um,
100%.
right, and that's it. And I actually just had a conversation this morning with someone about the idea of having a balanced board was specifically what we were talking about. But can you imagine, we're talking about a small group of people who want to kind of spitball a think tank, so to speak. And when you extrapolate that into the entirety of a parliament, of a government, what kind of momentous shifts can we expect? That equality, that equity, rather. That's powerful. What did you see? What did you see when you entered into that, realizing that you had a balanced government in that situation there?
Well, gender parity, it wasn't necessarily balanced in different aspects, right? So it's just a matter of like what lens are people using. And so for me, when women represent more than 50% of the population, I always say 51%, but like definitely more than 50%. I think it's important recognizing the importance of having people at the decision making table. And people have challenged to suggest that, well, the House of Commons is not at 50% women. Sure, but the population who we represent is. So I think what's important is the ability to advance and have those conversations. One of the things we did was really asking boards to publicly announce who was on their boards. And this was not necessarily a call to action or to suggest that the board needs to look different. It was just a matter of like showing what it looked like. So out of all fields I could have chosen in grade 6, I went to a day with a difference at the University of Waterloo. It was one day at the University of Waterloo where I got to see women in fields that they were not traditionally holding or they were not the poster child for. And what was interesting is that in grade 6, I did not realize that these women did not necessarily look like me, but I knew they were women and I knew I identified as a woman. And so I wanted to be a woman in science. So it was in grade 6 that I decided that I wanted to be a woman in science. And so when I was graduating high school, I applied to science programs across the country, and I was able to get into University of Waterloo with a scholarship. And that kept me at home, and I was really proud of it. It wasn't a massive scholarship, but it still was an incentive to go. And it was later on in life that I really recognized the diversity of women who exist and how do I be part of that narrative. And so I believe in evidence-based decision making. I believe that we need to really recognize who's being impacted by the outcomes of the decisions we're making. And I think that's what was monumental to me, is that when we had a cabinet table that was gender balanced, it mattered. But as I was at that cabinet table and as I was having conversations with individuals within Ottawa who were elected from across the country or stakeholders from across the country, I realized that people were advancing issues that were not in their personal backyards, but they cared about. So that's when I realized allies matter. And so it was really interesting to see that it's not necessarily the individual who's at the decision making table, it's about the individual and the horizons. Have they been broadened and how do we do better? So every single time I'm at a table now, I look at who's at the table and I appreciate it, but I also look at who's not at the table and how do I advance their issues and how do I bring about their perspectives? Because, first of all, yeah, I want them at the table, but at the same time, I also want to make decisions. So, having a limited number of people at the table helps make that happen. So, if more people can actually advance issues that are not just their own, but the issues of their community, the issues of people they've interacted with, the better we can do to ensure more outcomes are like available and achieved.
There's so many perspectives to unpack here. And as anybody joining us today knows, is that like this is Marketing Rebels. We talk about marketing, but marketing is so layered in every single thing that we do. And the idea of breaking down barriers, which is a really key aspect of all the conversations we have here, it's just riddled into the story that you just told, and how there are a lot of people who want to show up for themselves in their life and in their business in a way that makes an impact. We're looking to start movements. We're looking to create a positive impact on the world, right? Create positive change. And it's so important to have the seats at the table available for a wide array of people. And can you imagine if every decision in your relationship or whatever needed to be made always with two keys? This is, I use this analogy with my husband all the time. It's just this idea that there are two key decisions and there are one key decisions. And I tell you, nothing would be decided if everything was a two key decision.
Yeah.
So it's important to hold space while simultaneously understanding the dynamic of, we want to make progress, we're going to have to do it quickly, and too many hands in the cookie jar, nobody gets a cookie. So being an ally and injecting that in the way you're showing up, whether it's in your life, in politics, in your business, makes a difference. Understanding who you are as a person, who you're connected to, and who you're speaking to are all important dynamics of how you're showing up in life and business.
100%.
And that can be really hard because it feels like, and I'm sure that you'll agree with me, and our listeners and our viewers are the same way, it feels like everywhere we turn, even when we're trying to make this positive impact, there are obstacles in the way. And that's this idea of, well, there's a glass ceiling. Who am I? Some of the glass ceilings are within us, but some of them are systemic. And some of them, and it's hard to break through. So can you share a story and some insights on how we can kind of navigate that space while still making a positive impact and stepping into that power that you've already shown us in a short time exists and can be leveraged for positive change?
So I truly believe that I think one thing I've learned since being elected in 2015 is that I need to look inwards to be able to achieve and look outwards. Because I think oftentimes the biggest barrier, the greatest barrier to me being able to do anything was myself. So I've noticed that people around me have a lot more confidence in me than I do necessarily myself, just because of some of the stereotypes or the biases I've been raised with. So I think what's important is really taking a moment to reflect upon where we are and where we're going, to reflect upon what is it that we're missing in society and we want to see achieved, and are we helping it or are we hurting that possible outcome? And I think oftentimes, even when I was encouraged to run the first time for office as the MP for Waterloo, the federal representative, the individuals around me, some of which are now just shining down from me, I hope from heaven and the greater spaces around the world, around the universe, was really that they had more confidence in me than I did myself. So I think we really need to think about when we're having conversations, because of our own personal experiences, our lived experiences, our own realities, are we helping other people to be able to benefit from them, or are we hindering them? And I would hope that we help rather than hurt. And that's why, like, one of the things I think most of us have been raised with, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all, or be able to create space for respectful debate and dialogue, recognizing that we don't all come from the same background, same experience, yet every experience, every ability, every perspective matters when we're making decisions for a beautiful country like Canada. Canada is a country unlike any other country. Unless Indigenous, everyone immigrated at some point. And I think recognizing that we came to Canada for some reason. And so people will sometimes talk about refugees. Refugees did not choose Canada. We choose refugees. They come to Canada because we're giving them safe haven out of fear of persecution. And hopefully in Canada, we don't have to deal with that ever. But at the same time, everyone who comes here comes to contribute. And that's why the First Peoples are people we have to really give regard and respect for. But everyone else, I think, we have to recognize that we are here, we're building a great country, we're building a great community. And that's why I love Waterloo. Waterloo is a place, it's the only place I know. It's like my whole lifetime, and it's a barn raising community. If you think about the University of Waterloo, nationally and internationally known for the co-op program, for whether it's engineering or optometry or computer science, the arts, accounting, the list goes on. We have made a mark. But just think about how that institution was started. We have Whitfield Laurier University, which used to be Waterloo Lutheran University, and that institution is creating and building some of the best entrepreneurs across the country, around the world. We also have Conestoga College now, who has a Waterloo campus, and they've got the Culinary Institute. And I have to say right now, more than ever, we're talking about the importance of Canada, tourism in Canada, experiences in Canada, and these individuals are highlighting some of the best and brightest of our country. And I always say, as much as you want to travel the world, just travel Canada from coast to coast to coast, and you will experience the world, including the delicacies and the delicious food, because it's just the way we do. And I think that's because in Waterloo, we recognize that our best natural renewable resource is our people. It's our brain. And you can continue to train it. You can continue to achieve and do better. And I think that's what's really the highlight of the work that I do and really what I've gained. So I love being a woman. I love being a diverse woman, as I'm identified as. I love being a young woman, even though I'm not always, but people say that we are. But at the same time, I think what's really important is taking the time to learn from those around you, because you don't know what you don't know. So by having those conversations, having respectful debate and dialogue, we're able to do better. We're able to do more. And Canada has to do, must and needs to do better always.
Absolutely. And I think this is a really great reflection of how an individual, because this, we're speaking very broadly, we're speaking federally, the whole country, which can feel very daunting to a lot of people. However, I think it's really important to understand its relationship with the individual and how those connections are what you can leverage those things in a very authentic, real, and meaningful way to achieve not only personal success but overall success. Right? We rise by lifting others. And I feel like that's a really important part of being Canadian. I have so many conversations. I have a global business, and I talk to people from all over the world. And being Canadian, and being specifically from here in Southern Ontario, I'm just, I could play Nicky Nicky Nine Doors with Waterloo, and I love it, right? I went to school at both Laurier and Waterloo, and it's just a beautiful space to be in. And I think that even the world's perception of being Canadian, what it means for the individual and for even I'm going to argue the global community is all about collaboration. It's all about mutual success, and not only rising yourself but rising together. They always say, right, what is that old adage? If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with someone else. And it's
Can
true.
I jump in? I totally believe in a high tide
Absolutely.
lifts all boats. I used to be the tourism minister in Canada, and I was on the East Coast, and I didn't really understand the whole concept of a high tide lifts all boats. But I got to see the tide come in. So the tide was out, and when it came in, all these boats that were like, rounded on land, on sand, whatever else, when the tide came in, they all lifted up evenly. And that's why, even in your comments in regards to kind of what I've been able to achieve as a member of Parliament for Waterloo, as an individual in this community, would not have happened if it wasn't for the individuals who came before me. I stand on the shoulders of giants. And as much as I have had great potential and I've had great ability and I come with a lot of privilege, it would not be possible if a person like my grandfather didn't decide to come to Canada. It would not be possible if a person like my father decided that my girls are going to go to post-secondary and be educated to ensure that they have the abilities and resources to compete in any society, because he knew that education was the key. It would not be possible without recognizing where we come from. And looking to the past, sure, it's been done. You can't lose sight of what happened in the past. We live in the moment and we have to look at where we are. And oftentimes people will say to me, well, you received this award and you did this. Yeah, that's what I've done. I'm focused on what I am doing and what we can do. And I just think about like every ability. When I was sworn into cabinet in 2015, I was the first woman of Indo-Canadian descent who made it to the cabinet table. And when I actually understood what that meant, shortly thereafter, in August 2016, I was sworn in as the government House Leader. And one of the media people asked me, like, how does it feel to be the first woman to be the government House Leader? And I said, no, there's been, government House Leaders who are women in the past. They said just on the opposition side, but never on the government side. And my challenge all of a sudden became to like going from the only to being the first. So how do we bring in more people to do more of that work? Because I think that if I can see the next generation, regardless of age, do better than I have done, that determines that we have done a good job at this time, because I want to see people do better, to do more, and I will be there rooting alongside them. And sometimes maybe our opinions won't be the same, but we will have respectful debate and dialogue. We will achieve greater outcomes for more people, and we will do that by working together rather than against each other.
Absolutely. In fact, and this is so, I feel like it's so profound to some people, but I feel like it's also second nature to others. And it's just this idea that, having this kind of respectful dialogue, regardless of your opinions, you can find common ground in your values, which can take you as a whole, as an entity, so much farther. And I think that that's what you're saying here. And I get, and when you were describing the boats being risen by the tide, I could feel myself rising as well. It's just this idea that the concept is just so rich and poetic and real. And we need to remember that when we're doing anything in life and in business, and how the small business, because you, of course, were the Minister of Small Business and Tourism, as you said, it is one of those things where a business can have such a huge impact on a community, which then, radiates outward. So that personal work you were reflecting on, those firsts that you were commended for, and how you reflect on them, yeah, sure, that was the past, and now we're living in present, and how do we move into the future? As a business owner in particular, I mean, you've seen them make that impact. We need to have kind of the same mentality.
100%.
Okay, that's great. Celebrate those successes, absolutely. And what else can we do? How else can we make an impact? How else, and how we can stand in solidarity with one another and take responsibility for how we're showing up and how that's impacting the world around us. I think that's a really crucial part of being potentially a prominent person in your community, which, if you're in business, you probably want to be a little visible, says the marketing person. So it's just a point of view that can't be neglected. The other thing, my book keeps looking at me. I mentioned this before we started recording. I'm reading this book, The Big Leap. It is by Gay Hendricks, and don't get anything for saying that. It's just a book I read, and I like to share about some of these things. And one of the points that he makes within this book is this idea of challenging yourself to push past the next obstacle, the next barrier. And what does that look like? Well, in this case, we're talking about reflecting on the past, making informed decisions, and continuing onward in spite of some of the things we feel like might be holding us back, in spite of that glass ceiling that we can look through but can't quite break. Taking that leap and trusting yourself and knowing that, sure, you may be functioning in the zone of, I believe it's the zone of excellence, is what he references. I think you're talking about this too, Bardish, is just this idea. Okay, you're functioning in the zone of excellence. You've won these awards. You've made this impact. How could you function in the zone of genius? How could you push the barriers and really make an immense impact on the world around you? Now, I'm asking you this just for reflection, but I'm also asking our audience this to kind of think about, oh, am I really living up to my full potential? Have I really taken that big leap?
I would just say to anybody listening, you're doing tremendous things. And sometimes the world's not ready for what you're doing. And perhaps you're not getting the recognition from it. So I remember being elected in 2015 and people asking me, like, how did you achieve this success? I was successful before I was elected. But the world just had an opportunity, the country had an opportunity to see my success being elected. But that's not the greatest thing I will have done in my lifetime, I hope. I'm going to do greater, I'm going to do bigger. But I also think about the policies I fought for well before I was elected. I fought for same sex marriage well before the Liberal Party even supported same sex marriage, before the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that same sex marriage was a charter right. I am older than the Canadian Charter Rights and Freedoms, and that's my documents. That is my foundation in every single decision I make. So success is not determined by what other people think. Success is determined by what you think. And if you can start recognizing that you are successful and you are satisfied in what you're doing, that's what matters. The day I think every single individual can start giving themselves accolades, reminding themselves that they are bright, they are beautiful, they are meaningful, they are contributing, is the day I believe that every individual will be able to receive and achieve their full potential. But we live in a society where we're always looking for someone else to validate what we've done. And that's not the case. You're born into this world on your own. You leave this world on your own. We need to validate our success. We need to validate that we're doing good things. The one thing I always say to young people when I go to classroom visits is, like, your gut will tell you a lot. And it will tell you when you've made a good decision. It'll also tell you when you've made a bad decision or you're not really comfortable with the decision you're making. And sometimes it might be aligned with bullying. Sometimes it might be, trying to be part of the cool club or whatever else. So really recognizing that we need to stay true to who we are as individuals. I've been told many a times that I need to dress better, I need to look better, I need to sound better. But the reality is that I need to represent the good people of the riding of Waterloo at the federal level. And that means not just advancing what I know, but having uncomfortable conversations with individuals who provide me perspectives of things that I don't know. So in the last 9 years, the one thing I've learned is that I need to be comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. So getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is a really important thing. And so I think that's where, when it comes down to this whole concept of success and what people have contributed, I really wish that the unsung heroes of our communities, of our country, of our world were given a lot more attention and spotlight, because they are doing tremendous things. And I am grateful to you. And it might feel small. It might feel like it's not a big deal, but it is. When you care about your neighbor enough to know that you haven't seen them for a couple of days and you go check on them, it makes them feel like $1 million and a lot more because of inflation and affordability issues. But it also just validates that the whole human connection and the human race really needs to care for each other. And I think that's just where that conversation is something that's important to me. And I'm trying to help redefine what success looks like. Success, I think, is internal. If an individual is proud of what they're doing, it's important. If you look at this generation right now of entrepreneurs, a lot of them in the social entrepreneurship space, it's not necessarily about getting rich. It's about making the community wealthier by having better outcomes, by having better social outcomes, by ensuring more people can succeed. So for them, it's not about their internal success, which I was kind of raised on. It was about our neighbors doing better, which means they do better, which means a high tide lifts all boats. And so I really think we have to like challenge that conversation as to who are we highlighting and how do we highlight them. And I think that matters. So for anybody listening, you're doing a great job. You're doing great work. I'm sorry you're not getting a certificate. I'll send you one if I have the ability to. Let me know. Hopefully, like you'll let me know. And it's okay to like self praise. I know in the past that it's always been like arrogance. No, it's a little bit of pride. And the reality is if you don't toot your own horn, most people won't know what you've done. And we have to get good at like self praising. And Shauna, I'll say to you, I remember when I first met you, I got the honor of being at the Cambridge Chamber event. We got to have a quick conversation. I wouldn't have met you otherwise. And you said, we want to have this conversation. And I was so impressed by you taking that moment to say, hey, let's have a conversation. And woman to woman, it made me want to have that conversation even more. So I'm glad we're having it today. And you have created space for people having a conversation and being part of a dialogue who wouldn't have been part of it otherwise. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Well, I'm going to accept graciously simply because that's something I'm working on. But
I knew it was awkward. I could tell how awkward it became for you. And that it shouldn't be awkward. When you're doing good stuff, we should be able to recognize we're doing good stuff just like we recognize when other people are doing good stuff.
And you're right. And you're absolutely right. And I have to admit that I should practice what I preach in a more a deep way, but it is a practice. So, I get better at it every day. Now that said, I feel like it's going to be very hard to top that. I feel like that message is so profoundly beautiful and something that everybody needs to hear. However, I am going to give you just a moment here to spotlight if there's just one last. I know we just really dove hard into this, and I think there's something to be said about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and about trusting your gut and really being true to yourself. But if there's one final thing that you could share with the audience right now, I'm going to give you the chance to do so before we wrap up today, because unfortunately we do not have all day, because trust me, we would take all day. Feel free, go ahead and share with the audience what they need to hear.
Thanks, Shauna. I would love to have all day with you as well. I believe, like a couple of things that I would just say is that I truly believe, as much as the world needs more Canada, you see me with my little swag mug. I believe that Canada needs more Waterloo. So, like, the why I say that is because Waterloo is a barn raising community where we do care for each other. When my grandfather was here in the early 70s, as much as there was a lot of like discrimination, racism, and so forth, the reality was when you got stuck in a snowbank or something happened, someone always helped you out because we cared for our neighbors, we cared for each other, and we have to continue doing that. The other thing I would say is that elections matter. And sometimes we feel like our voices aren't heard, but engaging in the political process, however you choose to do it, it doesn't have to be in the traditional ways. You can start a petition, you can sign a petition, you can, support a political party, you can volunteer, you can start your own political party if you're 18 years of age and a Canadian citizen or older. You can also vote, cast your ballot. And the one thing I would like to see our community and our country and our world do is voting for rather than voting against, actually advancing the vision we believe for our community and country. So I would just say, cast your ballot, engage in the political process. And if you don't know, it's okay. The one thing I've learned as an elected official is people believe that I should know everything. You don't know what you don't know, and that's okay because we are blessed to live in communities and in a country and a world where someone else might know. And you might not agree with them, and that's also okay. Have a respectful debate and dialogue. Let's get together, represent the diversity of experiences and perspectives, and advance policies and procedures, regulations, whatever else that work for more people. And the reality is, as Canadians, we're competing against the world. We're not competing against each other. I want to see every Canadian do well. I want to learn about every Canadian who has contributed in whatever way. And I'll tell you, some people might think it's not a big deal what they've done. To me, every deal is a big deal because you've taken the time to do it and it means a lot to me. And based on the people I've spoken to, it means a lot to them. So just be your true, authentic self. The world does not have another one of you. To the people who are listening, be your best self. Give whatever you can, however you can. And if you need a moment to be on your own, that's okay too. Take that break. But cast your ballot, get engaged, be present in whatever way you can. And if you don't agree, it's okay. Have your say and listen to the others, and let's find a better way forward because we always can and must do better.
Oh, shot through the heart. I love it. No, that's beautiful. And it's true. And I don't think I could say it better, so I won't try. Really, in the end,
Better is always possible.
anything is possible. But in the moment, you bring to mind the quote by Maya Angelou, which is, when you know better, do better. And this is a really important part of casting your ballot, of stepping up to the plate, and being humble enough to admit that you didn't know, and it's okay. We can continue to learn, and we can agree. We can come to terms with one another in a respectful way, even if there is a disjoint in the way we're communicating or the way we're acting on our fundamental beliefs. That's okay. With that, I just really want to thank you, Bardish, for joining us today. And I want to invite everyone else to make sure that you join the conversation too. We have conversations like this every single week, and it's important that you cast your ballot by joining the conversation. Raise your voice. You have something to say. Say it respectfully, but say it, please. With that, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Join us next time. We'll chat soon.